Thank you very much. Thank you, Diane, for that kind introduction. Greetings to everyone here, of course, to you, Prime Minister, Minister Nicholson, to Senators Meredith and Seth. I see Brad Butt, Member of Parliament, Chris Alexander, also here, to our High Commissioners and dignitaries from all levels of government. Bonsoir, good evening, everybody. I want to say, quelle belle soirée pour célébrer les 50 ans de l'indépendance de la Jamaïque. What a great evening to celebrate 50 years of Jamaican independence. And what a great night to celebrate the friendship between our two countries. It's also a great privilege, Prime Minister, to personally welcome you to Toronto, the city in which I was born and raised. Your country's motto, out of many, one people, also applies to Canada and especially to Toronto, a city with one of the richest blends of cultures in the world. Also, as a fellow head of government, it's a special personal pleasure, a political pleasure, one might say, to offer my congratulations upon your return to office as Prime Minister. Now, actually, Portia, the president of the Jamaican Canadian Association, Audrey Campbell, where is Audrey? Over there, Audrey. Audrey told a great story about this that sheds a little bit of light. This is what the story she told me. She said that on one of your earlier visits to Canada, apparently you were walking through Pearson Airport when a Jamaican-born airport staff member spotted you. He immediately dropped the bags he was carrying, and ran over. And he shouted, "Portia, I love you." And then he said, "I didn't vote for you, but I love you." Then you hugged him, and he must have changed his mind, because like Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, who, by the way, married a Jamaican-born woman, you, Prime Minister, have also mastered the political comeback. It's no secret that Canadian Prime Ministers have long had special relationships with Jamaica. I've already mentioned Sir John A. I'd be remiss if I didn't invoke John Diefenbaker as well. Prime Minister Diefenbaker loved Jamaica. He holidayed there often, and in 1961, he landed a 140-pound blue marlin in Jamaican waters. At least that was his story. But when John F. Kennedy dared to question it, Diefenbaker ordered that his Jamaican blue marlin be mounted in the Prime Minister's office just before the President's visit to Ottawa. And you'll be glad to know that this noble fish has found a permanent home in the Diefenbaker Canada Centre at the University of Saskatchewan. Now, certainly, as Diane mentioned, I have my own very pleasant recollections of visiting Jamaica 3 years ago and the gracious welcome I received everywhere. This was especially so, Prime Minister, from your own Parliament, to which I had the honor of saying a few words. There is, of course, lots of history that we share, going well back, before even the 50 years of Jamaican independence that we're marking tonight. And I want to tell you a story that not only highlights the achievements of one notable Canadian from Jamaica, but also reminds us how long the people of Jamaica have been part of Canadian history. I want to tell you the story of Robert Sutherland. Outside of Kingston, Ontario, Sutherland's story is largely forgotten today. However, he was born in Jamaica sometime around 1830 and ended up in Canada as a young man. Here he flourished. A brilliant student, he became the first person of color to graduate from a Canadian university. He later studied law and became the first black man to qualify as a lawyer in Canada. This led to a successful legal career in Ontario, during which time he amassed what was, for those days, significant wealth. Thus, when Sutherland died in 1878, he bequeathed his entire estate, $12,000, to Queen's University, his alma mater. At the time, Queen's was in serious financial trouble, and this gift, $12,000, was then equal to an entire year's operating budget for the university. Thus, it saved the university. And since then, of course, Queen's has grown to become one of Canada's leading universities, and I was very pleased to learn that in 2009, more than 125 years after Robert Sutherland rescued Queen's University, the university named its Policy Studies building Robert Sutherland Hall in his honor. What a great story. Today, 50 years after Jamaican independence and a half-century of diplomatic relations between our two countries, I can report with satisfaction that our friendship is still inspired by the same benevolent spirit that animated Robert Sutherland. It is also founded upon a rich and shared experience, our partnership in the Commonwealth, and our common heritage of language, legal systems, and democratic institutions, a trading relationship established in early colonial days that continues to thrive, the peaceful path that we both took to independence, and our shared devotion to diversity and pluralism. Part of that shared experience is, of course, that for several decades now, large numbers of Jamaicans, thousands of Jamaicans, have made their lives in this city and elsewhere in the country. No doubt, seeking refuge from the Jamaican winters. There's got to be an explanation. La communauté jamaïco-canadienne compte près de 300 000 personnes qui font de Toronto et du Canada un endroit meilleur. The Jamaican Canadian community stands close now to 300,000 strong, and Prime Minister, Toronto and Canada are better for it, much the better. So thank you. Earlier today, Prime Minister Simpson-Miller and I held private discussions on Parliament Hill. We talked about increasing trade, growing jobs, and expanding economic opportunity between our two countries. I'm also pleased to note that our government announced earlier today an investment in innovative development projects that will positively impact Jamaica and the wider Caribbean region over the coming years. Now, friends, there is one more thing I want to say, something that I'm told needs to be said. It has come to my attention that since July, many in this community, in Toronto's Jamaican Canadian community, feel that they live in a shadow, the shadow of criminality arising out of incidents like the Danzig Street and Eaton Centre shootings. Audrey, you yourself have described this community's anguish, and let me quote, "There are so many hardworking, decent young people, so many accomplished young black men. As you said, we are overshadowed by the few." Friends, as one of your fellow citizens and as Prime Minister of Canada, I say this. Les Canadiens et les Canadiennes comprennent que la seule communauté affectée par les auteurs de ces crimes est la communauté des criminels. Canadians understand that the only community placed under a shadow by perpetrators of these crimes is the community of criminals. People who came from Jamaica to Canada have come in search of a better life and to contribute positively to our country, not to live in fear of street gangs and criminals. That is one reason why our government has worked so hard to bring in new legislation such as the Safe Streets and Communities Act, parce que les citoyens peuvent s'attendre à ce que leur gouvernement les protège de la criminalité, peu importe qui ils sont ou d'où ils viennent. Because citizens have a reasonable expectation that their governments will protect them from crime regardless of who they are or where they come from. And I am pleased by the strong support our Conservative government has received from Jamaican Canadians for these measures to bring peace and security to our communities. Friends, Canadians everywhere rightly demand this from their elected representatives, and our government will do all in its power to see that you are not disappointed. Let me close with this. Quand je cherche des hommes et des femmes qui sont vraiment représentatifs de la communauté, je pense à des gens comme vous qui êtes ici. When I look for men and women who truly represent this community, I think of people such as you here in this room. I think of my friend Don Meredith, the first Jamaican Canadian to serve in the Senate of Canada. I think of the late Louise Bennett Coverley, Miss Lou, so beloved in both our countries for the wit and wisdom of her poetry. I think of Raymond Chang and Michael Lee Chin, Jamaican Canadian entrepreneurs who have made enormous contributions to this country. I think, of course, of the late, great former Ontario Lieutenant Governor Lincoln Alexander. You know, we've had the opportunity in the past few days to reflect upon his life and all of his achievements. This afternoon, I visited Queen's Park, where Canadians from all walks of life are stopping to celebrate his life of service. He was not just a great Canadian of Jamaican descent. He was a man who, throughout his career of public service, was a role model to politicians of all backgrounds and indeed all political parties. I think again of Robert Sutherland, of whom I spoke a few moments ago, set such a fine example all of those many years ago. Men and women such as these, and the hundreds of thousands of men and women who are Canadians of Jamaican origin, quietly go about their business and contribute so much vitality to our country. These are the men and women who set the measure of what it means to be a Jamaican Canadian, and that is why I am so grateful and so honored to be invited to be here with you this evening. Friends, Prime Minister, again, I and all Canadians welcome you and join you in celebrating 50 years of our relations and 50 years of Jamaican Canadian independence. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller.